Welcome to another Hangouts at Home with Hello Sunday Morning. This time is hosted by me, Roger Falcon of Flint. And I'm joined today by Jason and Andy Quinn, the husband and wife team, who together have created Etch Sparkling, about which more later. Now, Jason has been in the Australian wine industry for more than 20 years. And during that time, he developed a dependency, which later became an addiction to alcohol. And all that changed about 2 years ago when he came to first a crisis point, then a decision, and then a commitment to change his life with the support of Andy. And they're here today to talk about that journey. So welcome, Jason, and welcome, Andy.
Roger.
G'day, Roger. Thank you for having us.
It's great to have you. I'm up in Sydney, and you're down in Mornington Peninsula, which for people not familiar with the geography here, is right down the bottom of Australia, of the mainland Australia. Next stop, if you keep going south, is Tasmania, and then beyond that, the Antarctic. So there's not a great deal between you and the great southern land. What are you doing down there?
Well, yes, we're certainly fortunate enough to live in a wonderful part of Australia, the Mornington Peninsula. And I moved down here in the mid-1990s to begin my winemaking career. And Andy
Fortunately grew up here, so.
It's a lovely part of the world, Roger. Yes, we're surrounded by beautiful beaches, wonderful bushland, hinterland, a farm producing area, tourism area, and a great food and wine area too.
Yeah. It is. I've been there myself a few times, and I think it's the most spectacular of the wine producing places. So what is a non-alcoholic beverage manufacturer doing right in the belly of the beast?
Well, the belly of the beast, I guess. Where I first started learning about beverage making was back in 1996 was my first vintage down here, beginning as what we call a cellar rat, which is someone who learns the trade from the ground up. And that's where I started my what subsequently became a 23-year career in the wine industry across Australia, New Zealand and France. And I guess from there, this is where the journey unfolds. And to this date, we now, as you say, in the belly of the beast, a non-alcoholic beverage business is down here.
Yeah. So can you tell us about your relationship with alcohol, how it's changed over the 25 years or so that we're looking
Sure.
at?
Well, I guess first and foremost, wine was my favourite tipple. And I really enjoy drinking wine. I loved it. For me, it was around the socialisation with friends, with family, celebrations. Consuming wine was around complementing food. And you know, both foodies. We love that. The artisan side, the growing side, the agricultural side, the creative side. Yeah. So with all of that environment, that's just really what drew me into the industry. And I guess for many years, it was just a wonderful complement to my everyday living and social well-being. And indeed, it played a role in connectedness too. For many years. But then what happened to me is that relationship changed, and somewhere down that journey, my relationship with wine changed to a dependence on alcohol, not necessarily. So, and my behaviours changed, my reasons for the relationship with wine changed. It wasn't the adoration of the beverage so much itself, it was the impact of the alcohol having on myself.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, Roger, too, Jason's drinking looked very normal right throughout the whole time, really, up until very close to the end. Most of my friends had husbands who drank, a bottle a night, and that sort of thing wasn't really frowned upon. So no alarm bells rang in my head up until his behaviour started to change. And that included things like, things I noticed were empty wine bottles stacked back in the wine rack. We had a very large cellar full of wine, and those sort of things started to make me think, I wonder why he's hiding them, because but other than that, it all looked very normal. He looked fit and well from the outside. No one would have known.
Yeah. So at what point do you think, actually, this is getting quite serious?
Well, this was actually in probably 2017 was when I first voiced my concern to Andy. And there's a little thing we all have, intuition. And I started to listen to my intuition because I knew my relationship with wine had changed. I knew my behaviours weren't sound. I pride myself on having a fairly solid moral compass, I guess, to use those words. And I knew that the things that I started doing were not correct. They weren't sustainable for a healthy lifestyle, and indeed it didn't feel right. Things like, we could go on about crash and bash stories, and I won't mention many of them, but as to relate, I guess Andy's just mentioned one, the trick of hiding empty bottles. I might be the lovely husband and cooking a meal in the kitchen, and I'll have my open bottle of wine in the kitchen. Unbeknownst to others, I might also have one open in the office or in the pool shed, or things like this that were happening to try and hide that volume increase that I was consuming for the effect of the alcohol, not for the enjoyment of the quality of the beverage that I was consuming. So that was 2017. I'd voiced that concern to Andy and said, you know what, I think I've got a bit of an issue here. Things were happening in life externally to drinking per se, work, career, just life stuff that everyone deals with. And instead of being able to deal with those emotional and mental topics via communication and work, alcohol would help me consume and just make sure everything was okay. I could remain stoic facade, push on and plough through. And that worked for a period of time.
So there's quite a few career paths you can take that are quite closely aligned or expected or associated with alcohol consumption, things like journalism or law or some stockbrokers or whatever like that. I mean, I imagine working in the wine industry itself, the pressures on you, the normalization of drinking was quite intense.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's probably across quite a few industry sectors, and certainly in hospitality, in alcohol production, but it's across many industries. I guess the prevalence, the accessibility, whether you're in the industry or not, for Australians, accessibility is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So if you switch from social relationship with an alcoholic beverage to a self-prescribed medicinal relationship, then the accessibility is everywhere. So it doesn't really matter what industry, I don't believe, you're in. It's that self-prescribed accessibility. And then when it tips from enjoyment to the daily stress relief to I've had a tough day, or I need to be able to sleep or relate to, or not feel is probably the big one. That's where it's a problem for many. In the wine industry itself, for sure, and the hospitality industry, let's say that. Yeah, sure. Accessibility is probably more so than other industry classifications, but there are still many that have a sound relationship, with that progressive nature of alcohol dependency, that is the one to really watch out for.
Okay. Andy, you've written a blog for us recently. It just went up on the website yesterday. From your point of view, as a wife and carer, sort of in a sense, and partner, you were facing a different kind of pressures. Can you tell us a little bit about that side of things?
Yeah, sure. So Roger, it was really important for me to look after my mental wellness. And I explain this in the blog that, like being on an aircraft in an emergency, you've got to fit your oxygen mask yourself first so you can look after everyone else. And it was really important that I did that and made sure that I was strong and well to look after our children and to help Jason as well. So, and myself. So I really sought out knowledge. I looked at lots of books, lots of podcasts. I sought help from a psychologist who had an understanding around addiction and the complexities around addiction. And I really just talked to people. And that was probably, a lot of people probably don't communicate because they've got shame around it, but it was really helpful to me to talk because that opened up doors for other people who had been through the journey before me and were able to come forward and share how they coped and offered advice for me. So that was really helpful.
So did you find that the infrastructure of support was available and reasonably accessible to you?
Look, there's options there, and I tried a lot of the options. I did a lot of Dr. Googling, and often I came up with help for the person going through the addiction. There was suggestions of what to do, but it's a really tricky one because the truth of the matter is the person helping really can't do a whole lot until the person with the battle decides to make the changes themselves. So I could be offering all these things to Jason, but until he was willing to listen, there wasn't a whole lot I could do. But educating myself from my own understanding to understand what he was going through was really important to me and helpful.
So kind of a question for both of you then. What myths and preconceptions did you uncover during this whole journey?
Well, for me, the myths and preconceptions were around, I felt I was alone because through one of the areas of independency, you become isolated, and isolation is lovely because it's you can withdraw and keep on your merry pathway. Not so merry pathway. But I guess the myth that once I started having some conversations and seeking help, I found I actually wasn't alone. There are many people on the journey, some further progressed than others, but then with that feeling of being a part of that I'm not alone, I was able to open up more and work on other areas of my life that then assisted in a acceptance and then sobriety ultimately. The preconception was, in an Australian culture, how do you exist socially without alcohol? That was a big one. How do you socialise? How do you go to a barbecue? How can you enjoy the company of others without booze? And that preconception, I'm grateful to say that after a period of time, has been completely removed. And it's actually, I now find, it's a preference. I enjoy, I'm absolutely connected in conversations. I remember what happened the next morning. I have a next morning. I'm not lying in bed until whatever time, feeling sorry for myself. So those are some perceptions of what I thought life might be like. We're very different to what I thought. Life is fantastic, and there are some really great benefits, obviously, from making some fundamental changes.
Sure. So I remember you telling me that around about the time before you decided to make a change, you were sitting around a table at work, looking at some of the other people around there, thinking they're probably in the same shoes as I am. Right? Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess, look, this was probably at the end when my that little voice in my head was getting a bit louder about awareness that I wasn't feeling very well, and I was considering this stoic male perception in a corporate environment and how you can fly under the radar under the guise of high performing, still got a good job, still achieving whatever you need to achieve. And I was in this meeting with a different group, different people from different sectors. And I was reflecting at the time, thinking, knowing some of the people around the room, geez, this is an environment for burnout, for challenge, and there was other impacts in these people's lives that were around these topics. That just really cemented to me, hang on, I've got to make some changes, because if I don't, it seems prevalent. Now, I know workplace culture is a big topic. Aussie male stoicism is a big topic.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep referring to Aussie male stoicism, but I guess it's where we can hide behind that facade and just put up this face that is not real.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you remove the dependency, and then you can start working on the onion layers of what actually do you need to work on to be truly happy.
I think men can be their own worst enemies, because they put all these expectations that they think their families want financially, and but it's not necessarily true. Often it's just within their own head. So the pressures that they put on themselves doesn't necessarily, in our situation, that was, Jason wanted to tick all the boxes and make sure we were financially set up, and put all this pressure on himself. But all I wanted was a husband who was present and involved. So,
Roger, that particular meeting, afterwards, after I came and shared my story with others, I've had subsequent chats with some of those people around that, in that room. And that was really, it's been interesting to say, I'm so glad you've shared your story, because I'm now working through this, or I have been working through that, but I couldn't acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And I had. So I guess that's one of the things about sharing stories, is that, well, if it actually facilitates a change in someone who might be a little bit on their journey,
yeah,
and they're just questioning whether it's alcohol or whatever, at least being able to be open, communicate, is one wonderful step in that pathway to acceptance and then change.
Well, I think you're right, actually. And in fact, that's the basis of the day breakout we do at Hello Sunday Morning. People talking to each other, opening up and sharing experiences. It's quite powerful to realise that there are people walking exactly the same pathway as they are, and not alone as they think they are. And there's a lot of cathartic sort of experience of just sharing what your experience has been, and it's very, very therapeutic.
It is. The journey of success, and then a trip up, success, and then a trip up, and just keep learning and keep getting there. That whole journey, when shared, again, you're not alone, and there's help out there, there's resources out there. Everyone's journey is slightly different, but we are working, as a social conscience, people can work together to get through it.
Yeah. One of the things that you just kind of alluded to there, I think, is that many of the people on the Daybreak app, it doesn't work first time, when you try and give up something. If you ever smoke cigarettes, you usually do it a few times before it works for you. And I think the same is probably true for giving up a dependency on alcohol. It's rare to nail it first time. But to get
I think there's a lot of shame around that when you fail.
Yeah.
People sort of think that's something to be ashamed of. But that was something I was really proud of Jason. When he'd have a slip up, he'd say to me, I'm just going to go around to mum and dad's now and explain to them what happened. And, he would tell people, and I can imagine that would have been really difficult. But I think that really kept him accountable as well.
Yeah. You made a point when we were speaking about a week or two ago, just sidetracking a little bit now, that there's about 1 in 5 adults in Australia who just don't drink alcohol at all, or rarely, every now and then. And yet, when you go into a bar or a restaurant, look at the wine list, go to a pub, it's as if this huge chunk of people just do not exist, because there's nothing there to cater for them. And that's the spark of what you built your etch sparkling around. Do you want to tell us about that? I think it's kind of interesting.
It is. It's. I find it a really optimistic view for Australia. I think that this was a part of the research that we were starting Etch off with in that business research and development phase, and looking at some of the statistics that are generated from government surveys, from resources around, and then applying that to the marketplace that is where adults shop or consume, whether it's in a grocery store, a retail store, restaurant, bar, cafe. And knowing some of those statistics around health and wellbeing change. So yes, there's 1 in 5 that don't consume alcohol, but there's also a mass part of the general population there's just might be changing their relationship a little bit. They might be wanting to get up and go for a bike ride in the morning, or a swim or a run. And so
health and be pregnant or health issues and that sort of thing as well.
That health and wellbeing trend is enormous. Clothing, food, beverage, the whole thing. Applying that lens and then what I observe in hospitality is that there is this. They're called wine lists, or sometimes they're called drinks lists.
Mm.
They're not called beverage lists or drinks. So when you have a look at a list, it's not 20% is not dedicated to those people that might be choosing a non-alcoholic delicious beverage or not drinking at all. So I guess that was a big gap that we saw in the marketplace for change, and even in the last couple of years, the industry's really starting to. The speed is just wonderful of progress. That it's fantastic for Australian consumption in the future.
There's some wonderful non-alcoholic drinks businesses coming on board now. A lot of them are mimicking alcohol in, alcohol-free beers and wines, spirits. They're huge as well, and there's some fantastic options out there for people who are looking for those styles of beverages.
Yeah, but for Etch, we chose to not replicate an alcohol category for reasons of one big one in this topic is triggering. We're not in. We just wanted to make a lovely, delicious adult drink that can accompany food and feel table proud. That's something that's really important to us. And I think the industry's changing. There's restaurants with degustation menus, non-alcoholic degustation menus. Retailers now having non-alcohol segments. So as we as a society change just how we're consuming, our access points are changing, and that's a really wonderful thing.
Well, we like Etch at Hello Sunday Morning. We like the theory and the concept of it. We like the taste of it too. So I recommend anyone give it a shot. And thank you very much for joining us today. And I'd recommend anyone also to have a look at Andy's blog, which is on the, I think, what's the day? Be on the 5th of October, 5th of March.
4th of March.
Thank you very much.
It was our wedding anniversary yesterday, so it got released on our wedding anniversary, which was a big day.
Congratulations to you both. And
thank you so much. Thanks, Roger.
Thank you, Roger.